We are recording. Let me go back. I'm going to start from the beginning here. Good morning, everyone. This is Greenfield Public Schools special school committee meeting. This is the budget hearing for fiscal year 2024. It's Friday, March 10, 2023, 11:30 a.m. This meeting is being held fully remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts June 16, 2021 order extending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A, Section 20. Per open meeting law, any member of the public may make an audio or video recording of this meeting. Can anyone who is making a recording please identify themselves at this time? I do not see anyone indicating they are making a recording. I do not see anything indicating that in the chat, so we will move on. Okay, let's do, please, Secretary Ekstrom, a roll call and call to order.
Member Neve. Secretary Ekstrom, I am present. Member Johnson-Musad.
Present.
Member Vice Chair Martini.
Here.
Chair Proietti.
Here.
Member Wall.
Here.
Mayor Weidegartner.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So we are called to order at 11:33, and we will actually do the first portion of the meeting is public comment on the budget. Let's see, the easiest way to do this, in case you didn't hear when we were talking about it earlier, if you are intending to give public comment, please at this point, if you're able to, type your name in the chat and that you would like to speak, or just your name in the chat, and we can assume that you are planning to speak. We will also call on anyone who's not able to put their name in the chat after that. Susan Farber.
Usually, I'm sorry if I missed it, but usually we, before public comment, we have a motion to open the budget public hearing for the Greenfield
Because it's a public
Schools.
hearing, you are absolutely correct. Thank you so much for doing that. I'm going to pause on public comment for a second. And can I have a motion from a member to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
And we'll need a roll call on that as well.
Member Ekstrom, yes. Or Secretary Ekstrom. Member Johnson-Musad.
Yes.
Vice Chair Martini.
Yes.
Chair Proietti.
Yes.
Member Wall.
Yes.
Mayor Weidegartner.
Yes.
We are now ready to open the budget hearing.
Okay, and we will open the public comment. I do see Melissa Webb, I do see your name in the chat. Did you want to do public comment, or were you identifying yourself earlier? Either is fine.
I mean, obviously both, but I would like to do public comment.
Yes, I was just clarifying that because we had asked you to identify yourself earlier. That's all. I didn't know if that was the intent. So we'll start with you.
Do I need to state which line I'm referring to, or?
I think that was more for the members in our discussion. If you,
okay.
You are welcome to freely speak. You have 3 minutes. Just give us your name and your town before you start.
Melissa Webb. I live in Greenfield, Massachusetts. I did listen to the previous budget meeting, and I just wanted to agree with what was said by Member Martini and Member Ekstrom about how I'm surprised there isn't more money for our public schools. We're not putting up these giant buildings, we're investing money and time into our students instead of structures. But I also was a little confused, and I hope someone can point it out, why the budgets between the 3 elementary schools were still vastly different. And I also was concerned about last year's budget as well. I know that has passed, but it looks like Four Corners received more than $500,000 more than Federal Street School, which that is a lot of money. That's not just a teacher's salary, 2 teachers' salary. So for me, that's just a concern, as we are going into alignment of curriculum and other things. So I was just curious if that could be explained a little bit more in detail, if it's just teacher salaries that is causing the difference, or if it's other expenses. I know there was talk about we have some tech money. And I know pre-COVID we also had some tech money, and we ended up not getting computers, and then it kind of was like this, oh, we should have gotten computers, but we didn't type of scenario. Again, I'm speaking for like 2019. But I don't know if it's safer to try and spread out us buying tech over the years instead of us just going, oh, guess what? Now we need to spend a ridiculous amount of money to upgrade all of our tech stuff. So I did hear that. And I know there was something else about buying a bus versus leasing a bus. I know we've leased in the past some of our vans, but we've owned our buses. So I guess, I mean, I just heard that being mentioned, and I just wanted to, I guess, touch base on that. Like, what was the transportation coordinator looking to do? You know, buying versus leasing. I personally feel buying is a way better investment than leasing over the course of a time. But again, it comes down to what we have for funds available. So that was my little spiel. And I already did talk to the superintendent regarding the Strings for Kids money, which I know my daughter thoroughly enjoys. And the Strings for Kids program meets multiple times a week, and they meet at the art space. So when she told me the number, I wasn't surprised, and it didn't seem like a large number knowing how many kids are affected by the program. So, and again, I mean, I'm surprised we don't have a bigger budget for our kids. So, thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And I normally do not respond during public comment, but just point of order that your questions will be addressed by the superintendent during her presentation. And it looks like we have Stacy Sexton in the chat. And again, for people who may have joined late, you can type your name in the chat indicating you'd like to public comment, or we'll take verbal public comment for people who aren't able to do that after the fact. Stacy, go ahead, just state your name and your town before you begin, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Stacy Sexton. I live here in Greenfield. I mostly wanted to comment about the timing for a public budget hearing being in the middle of people's workday on a Friday. The only reason that I'm here is because I'm fortunate enough to be able to work from home, you know, due to the kind of job that I work. But even then, I am clearly not doing work while I'm here, meaning that I will have to make these hours up some other time. Just seems like if you wanted to maximize public participation and transparency with the budget process, that you might not schedule. And I'm sure that you all also are having to rearrange your own work days in order to facilitate doing this. And I just wonder why. And I know that you can't, I probably will not respond to that. I understand that that's not how this public comment works. As sort of the gist. I also, this is more just thoughts for the future, but wondering, you know, I'm looking at this 7-page long budget document that was released as part of the materials for this meeting. And unless someone is like really steeped in having looked at this kind of documentation before and is used to seeing budgets, is this interpretable for anybody who isn't already part of this process? Can someone like really reasonably sit here and take the time and look? I just wonder if there could be maybe some other kind of opportunity that the school committee puts out that would be like an almost like a workshop or some kind of session where you're like, this is what this budget actually says. This is what the layout means. These are what these different categories are, just as another way to increase the likelihood that people could actually really participate in a democratic way in this whole process. That's just a suggestion for the future. Or at the very least, maybe a legend of, you know, just something in the, what does it mean? I mean, there's several fields in here where it's like div 0. And I understand that that's something that that Excel will pop out, right, when you've divided by 0, obviously, but to give someone an indication of like, what does that mean for the purposes of that line item in the budget? Because otherwise, just you can't really, it would be difficult for someone to interpret if this is the first time they've looked at a budget that's laid out in this way, if they haven't already been following along, right, or have been deeply steeped in how to read this sort of stuff. So that's sort of my comment about moves that we could make to actually work toward more transparent and democratic participation in this kind of stuff. Thanks.
Thank you. That is the end of the public comment that I see in the meeting chat box. You certainly could type your name now if you're intending to speak, or you can unmute and let us know verbally, and you can make your comment at this time. Last call, anyone for public comment? Could one of the other members just help me in monitoring the chat in case someone else does come in? But we're going to move on to the next agenda item, which is the actual hearing itself. And I believe we're going to start with a presentation of the materials from the superintendent, unless actually, Christine, I'll hand it over to you, and you and Andy and Karen can go in whatever order you please.
Thank you very much. In an effort to have me not get exceptionally confused with a bunch of tabs, Karen is actually going to share her screen with the PowerPoint so that I can speak to the information. So this is a reminder as we begin this of what our budget process is. At this point, as you all know, this is the superintendent's budget, and what has gone into this is that I have met with all of the building administrators. My request to all of them was to please seek requests for materials, supplies, instructional items from the staff. District level administrators such as our facilities director, technology department, also met with me, gave budget requests related to their department. We look at what we know in terms of staffing as best we can in December of a school year in anticipation of next year. And Karen, myself, and Andy Paquette, business manager, sit together, compile the budget. We review our staffing to ensure everyone is captured and no one is redundant. And then we look at grant opportunities that we have so that we can efficiently use the grant money to support our priorities. And then somewhat the last piece is pretty much what you see in the budget document and what I will highlight as we go through the PowerPoint today. So at this point, this is the superintendent's budget. I am giving it to you. And then of course, you folks can make any changes or adjustments as you see fit. But just so everyone publicly understands why we're referring to it as the superintendent's budget. So, all right, Karen, if you can move to the first slide. So these are our priorities. We, the district, are working with a number of Department of Education departments around a variety of components of the instructional program. So first, we work with SSOS, Statewide System of Support. We work with that group from the department because of past academic performance, primarily at the middle school and Federal Street School, but now the SSOS work is focusing at the district level. So we are able to use the funds and the grants to support district work, but we have to work with SSOS to create a priority plan that is very targeted to address academic needs in the district. We also are connected, as I've shared with the committee before, with the Rethinking Discipline initiative because of our past discipline data, specifically related to students, non-white students and students who are disabled. And that is primarily at the middle school and high school, which would generally make sense because we don't really use exclusionary discipline frequently at the elementary level. We also are now connected to some an academic team connected to some of the high quality instructional material grants that Karen has talked about during our school committee meetings. So all of those elements of the Department of Education are working with us to target all of our academic and social, emotional, and behavioral needs. We also work with an element of the Department of Ed around our social emotional learning as part of a work group. So that is some of the background around when I talk about our priorities. We have a lot of support in establishing those priorities along with our internal review of our student data, academic, behavioral, discipline, all of that. So the priorities reflected in this budget first are that we need to retain high quality staff district-wide. There's been a lot of conversation in the Greenfield community this school year, primarily regarding the need for us to negotiate contracts with all of our collective bargaining units. In Greenfield, we have 6. We have completed our work with 5 of them. The tentative agreements still need to be voted, so we can't really get into much detail regarding that. But at least we have done the work that we need to do, and the results of that are reflected in this budget. We continually hear that we need to be competitive in the region to attract and retain high quality staff. High quality teachers and instructional assistants primarily impact the quality of our educational program in regular classrooms, in our special education programs. So having a consistent, highly skilled core of academic staff is extremely important. We also need to have high quality staff that helps keep our buildings clean and keeps our students safe and fed, and that we respond to their medical and social emotional needs. So that includes our custodians, our cafeteria staff, our administrative assistants that keep the district running. Takes a lot of staff in addition to our classroom teachers that are front facing the students. The other piece that we need to prioritize is continuing the work about building our strong foundation across the district. Again, at school committee meetings, we've talked about the need to have a very strong core academic curriculum and high quality instructional practices, as well as classroom-wide, building-wide social, emotional, and behavioral supports. We need to continue to provide training for our staff so that they can utilize these high quality instructional materials that you've heard Karen talk about consistently for the past 2 years. Our students need to have access to high quality instructional materials that are targeting the academic standards, and staff needs to have support in learning how to utilize those resources. It's been a fairly significant shift in the way that these resources that we've adopted ask our staff to do instruction and classroom-based interventions with students. So if we expect them to utilize them in an effective way for all of our students, we need to provide them the training and support to do that. And then the last piece is to continue assessing our needs and provide essential resources for staff and students in technology and facilities. The technology piece is key. I will address a little bit of that further on, but I believe you will see that in this budget, we are prioritizing these 4 things. And that's how we're trying to support our resources. Okay, Karen? So you will see some increases, significant increases in our salary lines. So again, I can't get into much detail because they've not been ratified by our unions nor approved by the school committee. But one thing that I do want to explain somewhat is that in any of the tentative agreements that we have that have retroactive pay included. So if there is retroactive pay in any collective bargaining agreement, what that looks like in this budget is that I'm going to use very rough numbers for the sake of an example. This isn't speaking to anything specific in any tentative agreement. If in fiscal year 2022, a teacher made $10,000 and we agreed to do a 1% increase, the 1% increase is added, that's approximately $100. So then for the fiscal year 23 budget, we assume their base salary is $10,100. And then if that year's contract suggests there should be another 1% increase, it increases on that. So by the time we get to potentially the FY24 budget, those increases have accumulated. The $100 that we would owe the staff going backwards to fiscal year 22 is paid separately. That's not part of this budget. The accumulated increase is reflected, but not the $100 they would have made had we had the contract in effect at that time. It just changes the base salary from year to year. So you will see that the vast majority of our increase is reflective of the work that's been done with the collective bargaining agreements. Retroactive payments, if applicable, are separate and will be paid separately from this budget. We are implementing instructional leadership teams. It is through a grant, but that is one of the primary ways that we can facilitate the academic change that we need across the district. This is one of the places where I referenced the SSOS team is now able to help us with district-wide initiatives rather than only focusing on Federal Street and the middle school. We are continuing to work with DESE resources regarding rethinking discipline, but where that is reflective in the budget is our social work staff, the staff that oversees our reset rooms, some of our building monitors assist. And what we're trying to do is build a continuum of ways to respond to students who are struggling rather than utilizing exclusionary discipline or suspension as the first layer of response. So working with the rethinking discipline takes staff, and that staff is built into this budget. We also need to assess and improve our academic program across the district. In ways you'll see that are some funds allocated for academic resources, our literacy tutors, math tutors, the teachers who are doing intervention with us, and the special education programs are also part of our academic programming across the district. You will see special education services reflected and resources that we have budgeted to help us improve those programs and better meet the needs of our students preschool through grade 12 and post grade 12 for our students with special needs. Okay, so a little bit more specific. One more, Karen. Thank you. So some of the priorities specifically. We need to maintain our current social work staff, including our director of behavioral services. The reason that this staff is so critical is that some of the work that we really need to do that has been talked about previously, not previously today, previously in school committee meetings, is that our specialized programs within the district, primarily for students with social, emotional, and behavioral needs, can use some revision and enhancement. And the director of behavioral services, that is his primary focus, is supporting those specialized programs. The goal is twofold. It's to help the students who are currently in our buildings continue to be able to have the opportunity to remain in our buildings and to have successful learning experiences. The other piece is that we would like to have an alternative to sending students out of district to specialized programs for our students with social, emotional, behavioral needs.
Mhm.
Sometimes that is possible. Sometimes it's not, and students need that higher level of support, but this is a critical piece that, as the goal is always to improve the in-district levels of support so that over time, the resources leaving the district begin to diminish, and then we offset staff needed in district with the tuition money that we hope is not going out of district anymore. But it's not a one-year project. It takes time to build supports. And we begin those behavioral supports even at preschool and continue throughout the district, but it is not a one-year plan. The social work staff and director of behavioral services also are critical in our work regarding rethinking discipline. So we feel it is especially important to keep this staff. We are looking to maintain the district-wide equity and community connections coordinator. We need to do significant work around student attendance and trying to improve connections with families to the schools for students who are really struggling with attendance. The goal of this staff person is also to help us create greater empathy with families who come from a different place than the staff might, whether it's socioeconomic, race, gender identity, sexual orientation. We need to make sure that we're continuing to improve our awareness and conversations with families who may have a variety of different experiences than we do. Again, we need to talk about maintaining the staff we have for our TLC or reset rooms, primarily at the middle school and high schools. This is regarding our rethinking discipline. We do have some staff at the elementary, but the middle school and high school, where our highest suspension rates are, is where we're really looking to ensure we have a variety of options. School committee has heard us talk about the social emotional learning curriculum, continuing to do that for all of our students across the board. Again, this isn't a one-year impact. We need to continue utilizing the social emotional learning curriculum year after year so that all of our students have the same understandings and learn how to manage emotions and challenging situations within the school, learn how to respect and appreciate diversity, and build some strategies. And the last piece would be to continue professional development in asset-based trauma-informed care. Right now, the bulk of this training is happening with our administrative team because the classroom staff is, their cups are full. And we are looking to utilize this learning and to help our administrators begin to embed the work into all of the buildings to the benefit of all of our students. It is a conscious decision right now to utilize the learning in this way rather than to splinter staff development time one more time with all of the academic work and other work that's happening. But it is, we're trying to, again, impact tier one utilizing these types of approaches. Okay, Karen. Academic. We need to keep looking at our academic resources for replacement. You've been very well informed about the math and English language arts resources now that have been reviewed and replaced all the way up through 7th grade. You heard recently about the high school math resources that are being reviewed, and we're looking to make a decision there. We need to look at our science resources at the high school. We need to look at a lot of resources across all of our academic areas. And that is a priority for us, especially sciences, history resources. Those change frequently, and some of our textbooks are older than they should be to have up-to-date information. So again, I already spoke to the math and literacy materials. The instructional leadership teams are critical in moving this work. We are continuing to build our library resources. You've heard Karen talk about the weeding project. But it's extremely important for us to have current high interest reading materials at all of our libraries that represent the community of Greenfield and the communities at all of our schools. So that we've weeded our libraries, and now we need to continue to build a rich library collection. And then again, replacing instructional technology. So I'll give a little bit of information there, more so. That's Karen, you can leave this. The technology over the course of years, it does not appear as if the Greenfield schools had a robust replacement cycle identified. And I know at times there was some discussion about whether technology was or was not a capital expense. I think for the Greenfield schools, the length of time that we keep our technology for suggests it is a capital resource. And thankfully last year, we were able to get $100,000 worth of computers through the capital requests. We were identifying a significant amount of funds through our ESSER grants for technology. It is absolutely more prudent to have an ongoing technology replacement cycle. But given the fact that we had not had replacements in so long, we are now up against a situation where we have infrastructure technology that needs to be addressed, such as servers, wireless access points, which we have been upgrading. Our interactive whiteboards are failing. And we also need to take a significant look at what we're going to do with our Chromebooks for students and staff, many of which will come end of life by the end of next school year. What end of life means is that at that point, they don't necessarily take updates to their programs. They don't take updates to the security programs included on them. It doesn't necessarily mean that they just shut off and stop working, but those lack of updates do have an impact, because then it begins to maybe not run the most current versions of some of our academic software, which we are utilizing for things such as ELA and math instruction. So we get into a very unfortunate cycle if our technology can't support the academic resources that go along with our high quality materials. Special education. We do have an increase in this budget of a special education teacher for Greenfield Middle School, because we have a fairly significant enrollment that is expected to move up into the middle school grade levels. That doesn't mean that the enrollment in that specialized program at the elementary will decrease enough to move a teacher. We need to add one due to the numbers at the middle school. We've also increased an educational team leader position in the budget, and I will talk about that a little bit, even though it's sort of giving you a preview into a different discussion. You will see in the budget that I have reduced an assistant special education director. What this looks to do is shift the focus to the staff people that are day-to-day interfacing with parents, doing some of our educational testing and writing IEPs. We have struggled to fill positions. Right now, we have 2 filled, and we are working with a substitute situation. It's a temporary position due to some staffing needs, and we're finding a significant benefit to that structure as we are able to work with parents more quickly if we have more staff at this level. So the assistant special education director position has not able to be filled all year, and so we're reprioritizing. It does also have a slight positive impact on the budget, as the ETL position would be less than an assistant special ed director. We also needed to ensure that the budget reflects the tuitions needed. You've already heard me talk about our out-of-district special education programs. What I haven't talked about today is the fact that at the state level, those programs that are approved by the Department of Education were allowed to increase their tuition rates by 14%. That is almost $400,000. Andy, I was going to say $500,000, but it's closer to 400,000, correct?
Correct.
$400,000 in the budget that does not even include any increased numbers of students who might be in those programs. That's just a straight tuition increase. And there is some conversation about some relief being found in the governor's proposed budget, but there are still some conditions and parameters around the access. So at this point, it does not mean, even if there is relief in the governor's budget, that it would be a dollar for dollar relief. We also have to evaluate and create an improvement plan for our special education programs under our new director. I shared with families and with the committee this week that Dr. Dickinson has announced her retirement, and we are very happy for her to be able to do that. And we actually posted today for the position. This is a critical position, and I know that we need to continue to look at the needs of our students with disabilities across the district, academic, social, emotional, behavioral, life skills, all of the continuum, and continue working on a plan. But given a new director's perspective and experience, we need to have that person be able to come in and look at the programs and continue the work in some of the areas we've already identified. Okay. Okay. So here's a very succinct summary. As you folks know, the budget is broken down into two different categories, I'll say. One is described as all funds. That means it's all expenses, including those we would use local or city money for, and also expenses that we would use grant money for, our revolving accounts such as choice and circuit breaker. And then we have the local appropriation, which is just the money that we are asking the city for. And we differentiate them to help explain that we are using a fairly significant amount of grant funds to offset some of these expenses. So you can see, if we talk about all funds using city money and grants and revolving, we are looking to request a budget increase of 8%. If we just look at the money we got from the city last year for the school budget and what we are asking for next year, just from the city, it is a 10.35% increase. That is substantial, and I recognize that. The vast majority of the funds represented in that increase are salary. I think, we certainly, as a district, needed to work with all of our bargaining units to resolve contracts. And we talked about the fact that it's been very clearly shared in the public, not just from the staff and the school committee, but from community members as well, that our salaries need to be more competitive in the region. And I think this is the impact, at least in year one, as we look at the impact of those multi-year increases having to be shown in one budget year's salary lines. So you can see the difference, all funds over all funds from one year to the next, and then just the local money from last year to this year. This is the request. I just want to clarify that. Okay, Karen. Okay, cost centers. This is basically a little bit more detail, but very similar to the breakdown that was published in the budget hearing. So I can go through somewhat quickly because we will have the opportunity to go page by page through the 7 or 8 page budget. So North Parish, otherwise known as AEL. Again, I'm just looking at some general increase, decrease. Again, a lot of that is salary. I want to explain central office because that looks jarring. But first of all, the central office in FY23 was only $28,000. But what is reflected in here are the fact that Eric, our facilities director, moved some maintenance and custodial expenses out of the building level lines into the central office because they're more centralized costs. And the other piece that came up is Eric began in the district last year after the start of the school year. So his first year began very close to the budget development time. And as he went through his first full year of employment, he identified some recurring costs that had not previously been represented in the custodial and maintenance budget. So those are also reflected in here. An example might be, annual maintenance of, I'll make it up, fire extinguishers, something like that. Those types of expenses that might not have been reflected in prior budgets. So that is the bulk of why you see an increase like that at central office. Okay, Greenfield Middle School, the increase there is more significant because we're utilizing less grant funding toward those staff people. It's not necessarily that level of increase on the whole, but it does reflect an increase in the cost from the local as opposed to utilizing grants. Okay, Karen? Okay. District-wide, we had two school psychologists retire at the end of last year who were thankfully very well educated and very experienced. But as we look to anticipate replacements, generally we do not anticipate replacement staff at the top of the salary scale. So this reflects some adjustment in what we're budgeting, hopefully for new psychologists to come into the district. The decrease in district nursing primarily reflects the reduction in our float nurse position. Okay, going superintendent, that is not Christine getting a 34% increase. I'd like to be clear, that does not just reflect my salary, that is my department, so to speak. So that is more than one line. Okay, Karen, go ahead. Special education, in part, that reflects the reduction of the assistant special education director, along with some other minor adjustments. And you will see personnel. We did not reduce $1 million worth of staff. What that reflects is that in my budget proposal, I am utilizing $1 million of ESER 3 funds to offset the cost of salaries. That is significantly more than what was the original intent, but as we see the cumulative impact of potential salary changes, we already have a 10% budget increase request. So we really feel like I said at the beginning, our priority is to retain high quality staff. So it seemed as if utilizing that level of grant funds was a good investment in the district. So it does represent a huge decrease in what we're asking the city for in terms of just personnel. Okay, school committee increase. We had to make sure that we were reflecting not only the school committee stipends as outlined in the charter, but also Susan Farber, the wonderful school committee secretary. So both of those needed to be reflected in the budget. So that is a very broad category-based summary of the increased request to the local budget of 10.35. Okay. Erin, go ahead. These are some of our grant sources. ESER 2 and ESER 3, these were not our total allotments. This is what is being utilized in FY24. So primarily we're utilizing the remainder of these grants. The ESER 2, the funds expire in September of 2023. So that means from July 1st of 23 to September 30th, we can utilize this money. After that, anything that we've not committed toward for a purchase will not be able to be used. So we are ensuring that we use every penny of that grant allocation prior to its expiration. Title I primarily funds academic interventionists, our reading tutors and interventionists, math tutors and interventionists, along with materials and professional development. The ECSE is early childhood special education. We utilize that to help support an instructional assistant. IDEA is our special education grant, federal grant. That is almost in its entirety used to offset the cost of special education out of district tuitions. School choice, we have modified previous revenue estimates, and we're talking about looking to use 300,000 of school choice to offset next year's budget. You folks just voted to increase the numbers of spots that are available, and we are going out to advertise now. We're hoping that publishing these available seats early will be attractive to students. Circuit breaker, as I referenced before, is the reimbursement for high-cost special education services. Brief review of that is first we have to spend the money. So circuit breaker is basically paying us back for expenses previously paid. And the way circuit breaker works is we have to spend a certain amount of money. There's a threshold identified. We get reimbursed a percentage of anything above that. So if a student's program costs $30,000, but the threshold for circuit breaker is $20,000, we only get reimbursed for the $10,000 over the threshold. The governor's budget has a reimbursement rate of 75%. Up to this point, and again, Andy, correct me, I believe we're at 72% reimbursement.
Correct.
So we're estimating this amount of reimbursement in our circuit breaker. That revenue needs to be utilized for special ed. Special education tuition, we have some students that come into us that other districts pay for our programming, so there is some revenue there. Preschool revolving is funds that come in through before and after care. And transportation, we do pay, we do pay for transportation, but we also provide transportation for other districts, and we do charge them. We have recently had an increase in what we've been charging the other districts. We are still extremely competitive and want to be able to work with neighboring districts, but we also need to make sure that we're minding our expenses as well. So we've had an adjustment up. Athletic, again, Andy, sorry, I've been talking a lot, clarify, that's gate receipts, fundraisers, things along those lines.
Correct.
And AELPK, that is the general education students' tuition amounts that get paid for attending our preschool. So generally, we are using about $6 million of those types of accounts to offset the expenses. So when you look at the column on the very long 7-page budget, the marigold orange color column where it says FY24 total grants and SRFS, that is the amount that's coming out of a grant or revolving account for each line where you see it indicated. Okay. Karen, go ahead. So these are changes that are already reflected in the superintendent's budget to the school committee. As you folks know, but I will share, these are what I have included. You can change these, but We have removed an unfilled assistant special education director position. I talked about the change in funding toward an additional educational team leader. We have eliminated a float nurse position. That would be a nurse unassigned to a specific school, but who filled in for absences and also would be able to assist with all of the state mandated screenings that have to happen across the district and be able to help high volume nurses' offices. So at this point, if we would either need to use substitute nurses or our nurse leader might have to fill in when needed. We have eliminated a float custodian position, which was not filled. These first positions, no staff that is currently employed was affected. My budget proposal reflects the elimination of fourth grade band. It is an incredibly valuable and highly accessed resource in this district. But right now at the middle school, the band is not as robust as we would like it to be at some point. And we share a band teacher between the middle school and high school. That happened last year due to course enrollments and the shift of a music teacher out of a music position into a math position at the middle school. And we currently have a vacant music position available. So the person who is providing the fourth grade band would not lose a job. They would move into the vacant elementary music position. So again, unfortunately, making a difficult recommendation to you about the band, but preserving our staff. We've modified staffing at the Greenfield Middle School reset room. We have been using a certified teacher this year, but we are looking to move to the model utilized by the high school, where an IA with some additional training is utilized in that position. And the high school model has been working for a number of years. And so Michelle is looking to change to that. In the grant, we have reduced funds previously allocated for new textbooks down from 300,000 to 100,000. We have reduced the technology funding. Originally, when the ESSER grants came out and we worked to outline how those funds would be used, and knowing what the district technology status was, we allocated just under $1 million toward technology. I have cut that in about half. So the budget you will see only reflects using $520,000 of grant money toward technology. And we'll have to see what we can do in terms of working with the new technology director, John, and creating a replacement cycle. So, you know, we'll have to look at what kind of technology funding is able to remain in the grant versus what we plan for over the course of the next 3 to 4 to 5 years. As the mayor very nicely reminded us at the school committee meeting, we can create a 5-year capital plan, and potentially this would be part of that. And then we, as I already said, have reallocated $1 million of ESSER funds to offset some of the staff salaries. So those are all changes that are reflected already. We also have discontinued our academic coaches for next year. The staff who took those positions knew that they were grant funded and would only be funded by that grant for a number of years. And I have elected to not move forward with the academic coach positions for next year. At this point, we have another piece you'll see in this budget. We are anticipating the need for 2 additional first grade positions because kindergartens at Federal and Newton have bubbles, higher enrollments. So we have 3 classes in those grade levels in kindergarten. So we expect we would need 3 first grades. So there are 2 first grade positions added to this superintendent's budget for FY24. So in theory, the 2 academic coach positions even though reduced, staff would still have positions available. So again, looking to try to preserve our staff. So revisiting, in this budget, I believe you will see a concerted effort to retain our high quality staff across the district. Focus on maintaining resources for academic and social emotional behavioral programs across the district. To that end, continuing to focus on high quality instructional materials and approaches, and then the facilities and technology resources, which again, huge impact on student instruction and safety. So that's okay, Karen. Thank you very much. That is the superintendent's budget presentation. I don't know if you folks want to ask questions now or if you want to go through the 7-page budget.
So thank you very much, Christine. I appreciate that. And I also want to acknowledge both Andy Paquette and Karen Patnode, our business manager and assistant superintendent, who I know have been working diligently with you over many weeks and many hours on putting this together. And I appreciate all the effort to not only get us here, but also put together that slide deck that helps to explain the priorities. So thank you. And the budget committee as well. I know they've reviewed this ahead of time. And I believe that committee is chaired by Secretary Ekstrom and includes Member Johnson Musad and Member Deneve. I think I'm right about that.
Martini.
Oh, I'm sorry, Member Martini. I didn't cheat ahead of time and look at my subcommittee list. So thank you all for that work. I think we should open it up at this point to questions and comments from the school committee. And you can either just unmute and speak, or if it gets too crazy, I'll have you raise your hand. But let's try unmuting and speaking first. I know there's questions. No questions?
I appreciate the presentation. Thank you so much, Superintendent, because there's a lot of value in simplicity, and it was a really clear presentation. I'll have questions when we go through the budget. They're more specific to a single line item or something of that nature, but I appreciated the way you clarified everything in your slide presentation, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Other questions right now from the committee? Yeah, Secretary Ekstrom, go ahead.
I don't have any questions just because I've become so intimately knowledgeable of this budget. But I do want to say that this is the document that we've received is comprehensive, and it is far much more intelligible than anything in the past. The superintendent and Andy and Karen and everyone have worked very hard to make this as clear as it possibly can be without getting into the nitty-gritty of everything that's going on in it. I am proud for them, and I'm proud of them for all of the work that they've done, because I know how much the smaller budgets that I work on have much less detail, and I know how much work it takes to meet those, and to do this is a massive lifting of work and numbers and getting everything to align. And when you look at the individual numbers where it says div and things like that, it isn't because the formulas don't work. It's because they actually are working, and they're not supposed to work in the form that we are receiving it. And so I'm very proud of you all for the work that you've done. I'm very thankful.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Other general questions? We're going to go through the budget kind of section by section, but if there's general questions, we can do those now. Okay, so I am not the one to remember or suggest how we organize this piece of it. So I would defer to either Christine or Andy to walk us through the detail of the budget.
Okay, so what I thought I would do is share my screen and go through in exactly the order you have the pages by cost center. So it would go, basically it would revisit all of the cost centers that we talked about. I say we, 'cause we share the joy, that I talked about in that order from the Excel that we already reviewed. So I'll just share my screen and then we'll
Sounds good.
see how that works.
And I'll ask for questions or comments from the committee after each of the cost centers, if that makes sense.
Yes. Okay. So we'll begin at NP, North Parish, as I shared, that's AEL.
Just a
So-
suggestion, Christine, if you
bigger.
wanna,
Yes.
yeah, make it
course.
bigger. It's
Oh,
It's super, super tiny,
how's that?
way bigger.
You
Better.
want it way bigger?
Can you do one more? Let's see if you can do one
Of
more.
course,
Well, you have to scroll if you do that.
I will, but are you
That's-
able to see
I can-
all the way from column A to column M?
I can see, I won't answer for everyone, so if someone can't see on the committee, please speak up now. Let's go ahead.
Okay, so the first cost center is North Parish or AEL. Again, I'm not going to go line by line and explain every single thing that's in it. I'm going to scroll down and speak to significant impacts. Andy and I have spoken in the past about the fact that it takes a lot of work to keep putting the staff in the right lines in a budget, especially as they change positions, they change schools. And what we've been working on since I got here in coordination with Karen and Loretta because of grants and payroll and everything is reviewing multiple times a year to ensure that each of our staff people is captured in the correct cost center and in the correct lines. So some of the changes that you'll see, increase, decrease, primarily for staffing, is a reflection of moving people to the correct place. So that doesn't necessarily mean we have cut a special education teacher. That particular is that we had to make a correction from one budget year to the next.
And Christine, please remind us all or tell people for the first time, what does $div/0 ! Mean?
What that means is that there is a formula in that cell in Excel, but when the numbers in the other columns are 0, it reads it as a mistake because it can't execute the formula with no numbers. And that's how it shows.
And
So
we are
what-
not going to dismantle the formula within the spreadsheet because that's way too much work and it needs to
Well,
stay there.
what,
Yes.
if I may, what
Yes,
what it is,
please.
it's, I've been in other clients where because it's all formula driven, if you go through and just delete, then it starts to raise questions, or it has raised questions of the integrity of the formula in the workbook. So I err on the side of show the
Yes.
div/0 message rather than going through and deleting them all, or even you have the ability to put in a formula if it's a div/0 to hide that, but it still raises the question of the integrity of the formula. So I've chosen to depict that just so that there's a level of assurance that the integrity of the formula is consistent across the workbook.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy.
Okay. The social work change is that it's not really a change. We have some split staff, and what we're doing is just capturing that staff person's salary in one building rather than trying to split them across multiple cost centers. So that is not a change actually in staffing. Paraeducator changes. Last year, when we created the FY23 budget, we had anticipated needs that did not come to fruition at that time. So this shows the reduction we are no longer reflecting an anticipated need that we ended up not needing. Much like would happen if we end up not needing one of the grade 1 teachers that I have anticipatorily built into the budget. So, and then nursing, there was a change in our nursing, and it was to accurately reflect that we had a full-time nurse at AEL, and to adjust salary. So previously it was erroneously captured in previous budgets. So that is AEL. You'll see Eric, the last 3 lines in every cost center, these equipment repairs, supplies and materials, and maintenance buildings, contracted services. These are actually reflective of Eric's lines. Those are his expenses accounted for in each separate building cost center. And these are some of the things that you will see where the central office line for maintenance went up, but you'll see some of the building level costs are down. Okay, I would like to respond to the question about the staffing or the funding discrepancies across the 3 elementary schools.
Please.
Not having been able to do exceptionally detailed work on that yet, but one of the things that has clearly been identified in looking at our staffing, what I will share is Federal Street has 20 Unit A staff people. 70% are at a master's level or higher, and 55% of those teachers are at a step 6 or higher on the salary scale. So that's midpoint or more in terms of years of experience. Federal Street has 9 Unit C staff people. So that's IAs, building monitors, permanent substitutes. 55% of those are over step 6. So just like half of the staff at Federal Street is step 6 or higher in experience. At Newton, I'll do those 2 schools first. We have 23 Unit A staff, so teachers, nurses, social workers. 60% of those have a master's or higher, and 48% are on a step 6 or higher, meaning that we have more teachers at Newton who have fewer years of experience than even that at Federal. And Newton has 11 Unit C staff people. 54% of those are at step 6 or higher. Four Corners has also 20 Unit A staff. 70% are masters or higher, so the same as Federal. 65% are at step 6 or higher. So we have a couple of folks more at Four Corners who have more years of experience. The vast difference is in IAs, and primarily because we have 2 classrooms of highly specialized programming at Four Corners, where most, if not all, the students have individual IAs required. So we have 21 Unit C staff at Four Corners, 57% of whom are at a step 6 or higher. So I am not going to say that that explains every percentage of variation at Federal, at Four Corners over the other 2 schools, but it certainly does explain a substantial portion of that variation. So, we will continue to work on ways to balance out and ensure our resources are equitably distributed. One thing that we've talked about, I think, a fairly significant amount of time since I've been in district is that prior to Karen and I working here at Central, each elementary school was identifying their own literacy and math resources. They were able to identify which special subjects, art, music, PE, library, that they had access to. And that has changed. All of our elementary schools have the same literacy and math programs. All of our elementary school teachers are receiving the same professional development. Federal Street and Newton receive more Title I funding than Four Corners. That's based on proportion of students identified as having free and reduced lunch. So we have to distribute Title I funding by percentage according to percentages provided to us by the Department of Education. So, so we are, in my belief, equalizing access to high quality resources across all the buildings, but that staffing discrepancy, I think, needed to be spoken to. And again, it is primarily due to the high level of need for 2 classrooms of very specialized programming. Okay.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Should we take questions? Any questions from the school committee about North Parish School? All right, so we can move on to, looks like Federal Street is next.
Yes. Okay. So federal, again, what we're looking at for the salary increase, decrease, you'd be looking, this first white line is the increase in dollar amounts. Second white line is increased by percentage. And then this is the FY24 all funds, right? Yeah, I didn't make that up. All funds. And then the light orange is local. And this is how much grant or revolving we're using. I only share that because the titles rolled off the screen. So primarily in staffing at federal, what you're seeing is the request for an additional grade 1 teacher, as we anticipate the need for a third first grade. And then the impact of steps, which were teachers get a step, they move up a step for the years of employment. This also reflects changes in education status. So a teacher going from a bachelor's degree to a master's degree, that's a different salary scale. And then if you get 30 credits past a master's degree, that's an additional salary scale. And if you have your doctorate, that is yet another salary scale. So as we go through the year, people will graduate from programs or accumulate graduate level credits. So this is primarily salary increases. Same there. Integrated arts, you will see that we are using grant money to support an elementary librarian. Again, this is adjusting one year to the next, making corrections in our salary lines. I would like to share that the integrated arts staff, we have 6, 7, 8, I'm counting, sorry. Actually 7 integrated arts teachers reflected between school and federal. We, in the interest of having, ensuring that we're accurately capturing all of our full-time equivalent staff and their salaries, all of the elementary specialist teachers are really reflected in 2 buildings. So it's 2 art teachers, 2 music teachers, 2 PE teachers, and our librarian. As I said earlier, the 4th grade band teacher is not reflected in this budget. And then the building monitor position, the building monitor line here, you'll see there's an increase. What that reflects is that we did hire some of our permanent substitute staff. Those were positions that were included in the last set of collective bargaining agreements, not ones currently described. And so we have tried to find people who would be willing to basically substitute and come in every day, be committed to being here every day, because you probably all remember our lack of substitutes last year and the impacts that had across all of our buildings. And so these folks, really, it's great value because we then have at least one guaranteed substitute. They get to know the building, they get to know the students. So it's much more effective to have someone who knows their context. But of course, we still enjoy many day-to-day subs that come in, but that's really that increase there. Those are the primary changes at federal.
Okay, any questions or comments from the committee about federal? Secretary Ekstrom, please.
Yeah, I actually just want to make a general comment, and this is for people, I know that everyone in the school committee knows this, but for people who aren't familiar with contracts with unions, as we have with the school district, when a step is the equivalent, I guess, sort of to a longevity increase, I'll say, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. So last year I made $100, and that means that this year I would make $200 if I was just picking a number, and then next year I would make $300. They don't necessarily correlate to anything beyond working for another consecutive year, in the very strictest of terms. Just wanted to explain that, because sometimes hearing the word step is confusing, because when I think about raises in a different way than the school district does, and so I just wanted to make that clear for anyone who wasn't familiar.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And any other questions or comments from the committee? I can't see you all, so you have to just unmute. Okay, so let's move on to Green River.
Well, not much to say. We
Yep.
used to allocate some money to maintain Green River, and we've taken that out because at this stage, we do what is absolutely mandatory, given the fact that we don't know the status, and certainly should we need to do something that requires funding, we can do a transfer out of a different maintenance or custodial line. So it didn't seem prudent to allocate 6,000. I lied, to allocate more than $6,000.
Right.
So we just have that included. Some of the things we have to maintain at Green River are like our servers are there. So
Yep.
during
Questions from the committee about Green River? We can go on, but you're the driver. I can't see.
I'm
what
the
it says.
driver. I like to drive.
Four corners.
Okay, sorry, I have notes. I want to make sure I follow along. Right, again, Four Corners, no changes that are outside of what I've already talked about. Salary increases reflected. This reduction in Four Corners integrated arts does not mean we got rid of all of the art, music, and PE teachers. As I just said, they're dispersed across the other two for simplicity and ensuring we were capturing all of the people and the salaries. What was happening as we rescheduled integrated arts teachers across the elementary level, trying to keep track of percentages of their salaries in each budget. And then if we were to move them to a different building, trying to think about moving their money, it really seemed to be a very small benefit of doing that work to the risk of missing a salary in a budget of this detail. It wasn't a good plan, so we're not doing that. Again, increase in salaries reflected across the board. Mike shared that based on what they have for instructional supplies and what the requests were from staff, he's actually reducing his supply request. That's pens, pencils, paper, laminating material, that kind of thing. And again, these lines, maintenance, equipment repairs, and supplies, those are custodial lines. So it's really nothing significant at Four Corners.
Questions from the committee? It just occurred to me, this is probably simple and can, the cost of after school is not ever going to be reflected in, even though it's hosted at the elementary schools, it's not reflected. We're not taking on any cost of those programs. Is that right?
Before school or after school?
I'm talking about after school, but maybe I should ask about both.
Before school, the district does pay for.
That's what I thought, because after school is coming from, is it recreation? Is that?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the rec
Thank you.
department. That has no bearing on this budget, but before school does.
Okay, and that is for staffing primarily, is it, does it also include?
Correct,
No,
it's staffing.
staffing,
staffing.
okay, right. Any other questions from the committee about Four Corners? So we can move on to Newton.
Okay. You're going to hear a similar song. Again, really just making adjustments. Newton teaching staff, some of this increase reflects the second of the additional first grade teachers that we anticipate. So a lot of these, the social worker salary here, remember we talked about there was an increase at AEL. This is the offset. So it doesn't really reflect a change in staff. Again, the addition of funds under building monitor is the presence of a permanent substitute at Newton. Actually, Darlene has 2 part-time people at Newton, not 1 full-time, but still works out. Nursing services, that was an adjustment from the anticipated salaries last year versus the actual salaries for this budget. And that's it. Again, very similar.
Mhm.
And consistent.
Questions from the committee about Newton School? And again, you're the driver, so.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
That's all right.
we gotta move. Okay. This little part up here, central office, we pay a rental agreement for the church parking lot, which is where the bulk of our vans and little buses live. This was the significant increase that you saw on the cover sheet for the cost center of maintenance, where Eric has moved a lot of expenses and then captured previously uncaptured but recurring expenses. And this is some equipment that he has been looking for since he got here that we've reflected in the budget. That's it for this.
Any questions from the committee about the central office section? And we'll go on to the middle school, please.
Okay. Again, you are going to hear a very similar explanation. The middle school staff, special ed staff increase, a bulk of that reflects the anticipated salary of the new special education teacher that we need because of numbers of students in the program. Just to explain, in special education regulations, if you have students who are primarily in specialized programs throughout their instructional day, there are ratios of numbers of students to numbers of adults that have to be in the classroom, which is why we need to look for another teacher. Otherwise, we would be exceeding those ratios.
And any questions from the committee about the middle school? Were you done? I didn't interrupt you, did I?
That's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, please. You paused and I
Well,
assumed I could jump in there. Go ahead.
No, it's all right. We are using, you'll see a fairly significant increase here in grade 7 teaching staff. What that really reflects is that we've just reflected less grant money specifically in the middle school line. So you see an increase there. The other piece is that previously we had reflected, we had been anticipating using school choice money to offset expenses at the middle school. But when you know, at some point, the students that you've been paying for, theoretically paying for at one level, age up. And so now you'll see that we're using school choice funds more so to offset at the high school than at the middle school. But so it's really just changing where we're using it. Now you can go.
Any questions or comments from the committee? All right, we can move on.
Okay.
They're gonna all wait to the end. I mean, don't get excited.
know.
You're not getting questions.
4 hours worth of questions, but that's all right. If people can remember their question this whole time, they deserve to ask it. So at the high school, we had a change in guidance. We did not reduce guidance. We had to, we reflected a change in where they were charged is all. And then instructional integrated arts, there's a rather significant increase here, but one of these salaries we discovered in a subsequent review actually should be reflected at the elementary. So this isn't really the increase it looks like at the high school, but and outside of that, generally everything is the same conversation we've been having. There is an increase you'll see here at the high school, GHS other services principal. We are reflecting the cost of the Beacon program. That is an alternative program for students in general education that we've been participating with GCC for the past 2 years, last year and this year. And so previously the cost had been reflected in a grant. It's still reflected in a grant. We just hadn't reflected it in the budget because it became part of the district after that budget was created. So now we're adding it to the budget, but you'll see it's offset by grant funds. So that's it for high school.
Questions from the committee about Greenfield High School?
Yeah, if I could, it's the mayor.
Please go ahead.
Superintendent, I don't know. Maybe I had a momentary nap, but would you explain line 134, integrated arts again, the increase?
Yes, actually, that is.
Is that the right one?
I'm
Yeah.
gonna go with that's the one mistake. One of those salaries actually is supposed to be charged to an elementary integrated arts teacher, and then the remainder would really be reflective of steps, potential increases, and degree.
Okay, so what are you saying then? That's what I thought you had said, but I wasn't sure. Are you saying that line, that 703,457 would eventually get reduced because of the salary to go to the elementary school by
Yes.
a certain amount? I don't need to know how much, but
Right, yes,
yeah.
correct.
So, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just to add, if I may, Mayor, this is the ongoing work we're doing with the city regarding the munis and the personnel control ledger work, in a sense that there are some of the fields and so we've been sorting it by the fields to capture by the organ object. But then when you look and see some of the subfields, and this teacher in particular, that is an elementary school teacher, is mapped to the integrated arts at the high school. So
Okay.
in our cleanup, we'll be addressing those.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any other questions from the committee?
I have one.
Please.
I see that the, let's see, it's lines 126 and 138 for special education teaching staff is down 173,000, and special ed paras down 10,000. Can you speak to that?
Well, yes, and Andy's going to help remind me of some of the detail. We had increased a staff person. Well, one, we're not using grant funds. No, that's not right. That's not going to help. We reduced a special education teacher that was in place for last year. We had anticipated a certain number of students to be part of one of our specialized programs, and that number of students didn't come to be what we had anticipated. And then even though that was the case, the staff was left in the program, and then they made the choice to leave the district, so we didn't replace them. And then Andy, I don't know if you can speak to whatever else. I'm trying to think of what other factor would have impacted that decrease. Sorry, Kate, just that's one detail I don't have without Andy's help.
I'm
Okay.
just I'm doing the comparison here to get the answer. Just give me a minute, please. If you want to continue on, I can circle back to that.
Well, I think the high school paraprofessional, given that low amount, my bet is that that just reflects changes in staff from, experienced IAs who are higher up on the salary scale and newer people with less experience coming in. Because that's a fairly I'm not aware that we've reduced IAs on the whole outside of if we had had a one-to-one who wasn't needed anymore. You know, we would obviously reduce that if the student graduated from the high school or went to some different programming outside of the district.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to let Andy finish looking at the other, or do we want to continue and then Andy can circle back?
He can interrupt when he's ready to
Okay.
answer. Yeah. Any other questions from the committee about Greenfield High School budget? All right, we can move on then.
Okay, we're getting there, I promise.
No worries.
All right, we're going to do some chunks. So district-wide, these are generally services that affect the whole district. And you can see not much change across the board. This nursing line, in the past, we had two separate lines that were identified as something, again, part of the cleanup, but the money reflected there didn't actually match the description. So what you're seeing here is this now, line 164, is reflective of our nurse leader.
Mhm.
And then later in the budget, you will see nursing services float that has been zeroed out. So this is now solely our nurse leaders salary. And then psychologists, as I spoke earlier, we had two veteran, highly educated psychologists who retired, ironically, who are continuing to do work for us, thankfully. But we've anticipated the staff that would replace them to be at a lower level education and experience. So that's the change there. I'm gonna go to curriculum, if that's okay, Amy.
Yeah, keep
Same
going.
page, okay.
Yeah.
Again, significant changes. We added some, oh, Andy's done. Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
So
Andy, go ahead. Yeah.
a sneak preview of things to come. There was a personnel that again were there on the ledger, control ledger, was tied to that line. That was a medical therapeutic position. So when we look down, you'll see a substantial increase in that. So that's why it was just putting them from the sped teacher line, part of the salary, down to the medical therapeutic line.
Thank you.
Okay, instructional supplies district-wide. We were utilizing additional grant money, which is why you're going to see that increase in line 179. We're not really offsetting with grant funds right there. And then the tech supplies in the curriculum and instructional line is really the online resources connected to our instructional programs. And every year, what we do is look at the usage reports for the many online resources that we have. And if they are not highly subscribed in their targeted area, then we've been moving to reduce them from the budget. So we did a lot of this work last year and we're continuing. This will be an annual part of reviewing the budget. If a program's not really being used, then we're not going to keep paying for it. So, okay.
Yeah, you want to do through the bottom
All
of
the
this
rest of the
page
page?
and yeah,
Yep.
why not?
Okay, no problem. I think you can see we have a tutor translator that works with us for Moldovan and Romanian families. Athletic transportation, self-explanatory, cost of transportation is going up, so Coach K has anticipated an increase. Professional services, this is some increases and also some capturing things that had previously been uncaptured, such as we have staff that supports our athletes in the weight room as part of the training for our athletic program. Things along the lines of like impact testing for the concussion pre and post testing. So it's really reflective of some increases and then some catch up from previously uncaptured expenses. This is the float nurse line 192 that I shared has been reduced as part of my budget proposal. Contracted services for nursing, Melissa reflected things that have not been reflected but have been paid for, like the AED servicing, calibrating of our audiometers and vision machines for the required hearing and vision screenings. So that's in here. And then supplies for nursing, just, we need a lot of stuff. It's not all just Band-Aids in the nurses' offices, and the costs of those are increasing. So she did build in an increase. The red line personnel assistant. So I added a 504 coordinator for the district in this budget proposal, and I'll explain why. To this prior, we have had stipend positions for staff who are currently working full-time jobs in our buildings to run the 504 meetings for any student who is a general ed student but qualifies for accommodations under ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. And this is something we are required to do. We need to acknowledge and provide accommodations as needed. There's criteria, but this is required. And what we've discovered is that as the numbers of students eligible for these plans grow, it is becoming harder and harder for the staff doing it on a stipend position to actually do the work. And then we also have situations where no staff has asked for the stipend position, but that doesn't eliminate the need to do the work. The other piece of it is there are laws that are governing 504 eligibility and process and procedure. And if we have staff that changes year after year, there is a learning curve that is needed. You know, we have to retrain all the staff if it's somebody who changes year to year, which is, it can be problematic. So this is really, it would be a slight reduction in the stipends and an increase. This, I believe, would be part of the work we're trying to do in terms of the pupil services department in having additional staff able to work directly with families more frequently than trying to ask a staff person who's already working a full load to accommodate a growing need. So very long story about why, but I think it's important to serve our families more and our students more efficiently if we have some more.
And what's a 504? What do you mean?
Yeah.
What is that?
Section 504 accommodation plan refers to the section of federal law that requires that any entity that receives federal funds has to be compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's the same law that actually governs the requirement for cities to have curb cuts on sidewalks for wheelchair accessibility. Anything related to ensuring that people with disabilities have access to the same resources basically as non-disabled people.
Thank you.
But in schools, that can be things like learning, speaking, eating, walking. So if we were to have, for example, a blind student and they needed things like Braille on items in the cafeteria so that they could serve themselves lunch like everybody else does, that would be something potentially that could come on a 504 plan, is access to Braille materials. That's just one example, but that's what a 504 plan would be. The piece I do want to share as well is because it is a general education umbrella, it is not, we are not able to get any special ed funding or circuit breaker reimbursement. All students in special education are protected by ADA, but not everyone under ADA receives special education.
Thank you.
Okay.
Am I to understand that what you're saying is this reflects a single person?
Correct.
Now it's a new position that reflects a single person that was replacing a few other sort of more random.
It was replacing
Stipends. Yeah, stipends.
Correct, yes.
For people that already were doing other work.
already
Yes,
working
so we were
full-time.
asking our social workers or teachers to
Sure.
take on the 504 work, and
Okay.
it's getting to be too complex and too time consuming.
The work was still there and growing, and the people that had been doing it were not able to keep up with the amount of work.
No, that is absolutely accurate.
Okay, thank you. So are you finished with this page, Christine?
Very much so.
And do we have questions, other questions from the committee about anything on this page here? All right, let's keep
Okay.
going.
Driving, we are almost to the end. All right, technology. Data management staff. I am going to sit here and absolutely confess, Andy, that I cannot right now think of why that's reduced. Oh, yes, I do. I lied. That's one of my few notes. I lied. This is the reduction of the registrar position.
Correct.
I don't know why it's been in technology, but that's where it is. So that's a reduction in the registrar. The reduction in the technology director, there were benefits that were needed. There were some benefits that were previous staff was entitled to. So the FY24 reflects a reduction because that would not be a recurring cost. We are doing the phone upgrade project because the schools and the city were able to work together and to reallocate capital funds to do a federally required phone upgrade. And this is just reflecting some, cost of living increases around our phone systems and such. System software lease, Andy, if I'm not mistaken, this is copier leases and related costs.
Correct.
Tech supplies, just an increase in, not to minimize them, cables, mouses, it sort of switches and plugs and the pieces that make the technology work, but not computers themselves. And then there is a slight increase here because in dues, professional dues and subscriptions, line 211. When Joel was here as our director, one of the things he identified is that our IT staff really should have ongoing training, especially as we upgrade servers and other elements of the network. And this would support them being able to do some ongoing training that we need them to have. And then this is the bulk. This is the technology. You can say substantial increase, but we are looking to use the $520,000 left in the grant to offset that. I still think that we need to finish the detailed review of our technology because it's going to affect our ability to have students access our instructional resources if we don't move along upgrading the technology.
Is that 520? That's the ESSER grant that's coming out of the ESSER grant, right? And
Yes.
Remind me, was that 2, 3, or both of them?
2, I believe you said.
Well, we had money in both, and I took it out of one to help address potential contracts scenarios.
Okay. Got it.
So this is remaining, and I will be honest, I'm not sure which one, but it's one of the two.
Okay, it's that minor detail, just double
Yes,
checking.
Thank you. I want to say it's 3 because of the length of the academic year. I don't think we're going to finish our technology review by September. So
It's 3.
It's 3. All right. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
I'm going to keep going if that's all right. Okay. No changes to the budget proposals for any of the system-wide things, postage, travel, et cetera, et cetera. We have to include a line for bad debt for schools, meaning, although not really relevant now when everybody pretty much is free, but with the school lunch program, if there were meals that had not been paid for, we can't carry that over. So at the end of a year, we have to address any of that. As I said, less of an issue when we do have free lunch across the board. Okay, special education, the reduction in administration of special education. Again, we're reducing an assistant special education director.
That is
This-
currently a vacant position.
It is currently a vacant position, yes. Andy, if I'm not mistaken, this therapist special education is the bulk of where that high school special education money went.
Correct. And the movement of, they were all spread throughout, but since they are itinerant by nature, we've been moving all of them to this one central line.
Secretarial staff, special education, that's reflecting generally some moves of, people coming in at different steps, plus any contractual obligations. Tutors, special ed salary, this is a cost we've had. It just had not been built into prior budgets. Contracted services for evaluations, again, needing to increase our ability to do those at times using out of district contracted services providers. Instructional materials, this is based on materials that are identified in students' individual educational plans. So these are often student specific things, or testing materials, things specific to special education. Technology for special ed, again, generally it is student specific. For example, if the student who might have a visual impairment needs a particular type of computer keyboard to address their disability, that might be something under this line. And then we have our special education tuitions. This does include the 14% increase, and you can see in that marigold line, we are using a lot of revolving and grant funds to offset tuition.
Okay.
Can we just take a second for anyone who's hearing about the 14% increase for the first time at this meeting to just explain what that is?
Yes, so the specialized day schools, examples might be Willie Ross School for the Deaf would be a very good example. They have to get approved. Many of them get approved by the state. And if they are an approved program under the Department of Education, those programs were able to increase their tuition rates by 14% for this upcoming fiscal year. The rationale around that was to try to entice staff. Ironically, we are paying for their staff salary adjustments, as well as additional cost of living increases. To give some context, those programs generally do get to increase their tuitions annually. But if you look at a trend over the last 5 to 10 years, it's anywhere between like 0 with a high of 4%. An average is generally 2%. And for FY24, they will have a 14%.
And that is passed on as from the state to the districts, and that's non-negotiable.
Correct.
Thank you.
There was a lot of advocacy from superintendent groups, special education director groups around that increase, as you can imagine.
Sure.
And again, I think I shared the discussion is that there would be some relief included in the governor's budget, which there is some relief included in the governor's budget, but there are still parameters like I talked about with circuit breaker reimbursement. There are still parameters about when we could get it. So at this point, it does not look like it would be a dollar for dollar reimbursement.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The numbers in line, I'm sorry, were you through, Christine? I didn't.
Yes, I'm
You okay? Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in if you weren't through. In line 240, let me think if I got the right number. Line 246, the numbers that are in the all funds and the I'm sorry, the local and the gold, the marigold there are different than the ones that I have in the budget that I printed out from whatever, the last time we got one. They're a little less.
Correct.
Okay.
There was, we were moving last minute changes regarding the use of circuit breaker that would be required to. The bottom line doesn't change. but
No.
that one did change. You are correct, Mayor, on that one.
Okay, good, good.
Yeah.
So for anyone trying to follow along at home, it sounds like after the materials were publicly posted for
Yeah.
this meeting, there was a slight change made to how those numbers are actually being categorized or presented, but it doesn't change the bottom line. Is that
That is
right?
correct. It was,
Okay. Thank you. And is that, we're good with the questions? Any more questions from the committee on this page of items?
Yeah, what's happening with 230 and 231, the extended school year funds?
So we, as you know, we have to provide extended year programming for students who require it based on their IEP and IEP team decisions. So we use a combination of this money for extended year, and we also have money that supports Title I for extended year. And if I'm not mistaken, any overage, last year we utilized some funds out of the ESSER grant to take care of any overage in staff. So we still have allocation for extended year staff of 60,000 for special education.
and if I may, just for the extended year this past year, there was only 20 some odd $1,000 expended. So this is kind of that one of those, we have to plan for maximum potential use of the extended year, but trend wise, we're comfortable keeping it at the 60, the way that the trends have been historically as to what's been used out of the local.
Thank you. Other questions? Oh, Vice Chair Martini, were you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions from the committee about these sections? Okay, let's keep moving. Was that the end? Is there more? One more page?
We're almost there.
There we go.
Okay, this is a small section reflecting expenses for those students on 504 plans, as I outlined. Okay, custodial. Again, we've talked about a lot of this. This $38,000 in line 255 reflects the reduction of the float. The increase of 31,000 for disposal services is because based on current year's use, the amount that had been reflected prior to Eric joining us was not sufficient to take care of the disposal services, so he's adjusted that. The rest of this section are minor adjustments. The 16,000 I already mentioned is some equipment that Eric has been looking for. It doesn't meet the threshold for a capital expense, but it's too pricey to just order it with the pens and pencils and the staplers. So, okay, transportation. We use Kosmeskis, obviously, for our primary transportation, and then the district owns vans and provides almost all of our special ed transportation, transportation required for students who are categorized as homeless, and some transportation we provide for other districts, especially around students who are in those districts that attend the same out of district programs as our students do. So we sort of swing by and pick them up on the way by. So SPED transportation staff, there is a minor increase. Those are our bus drivers and monitors primarily. Regular ed transportation district-wide, we have Jake, our transportation coordinator, that we'd like to pay. Crossing guards, we had an adjustment in crossing guards. We had, I believe this, Andy, is actual rather than previously budgeted.
Correct.
And then this transportation contracted services, that reflects our Kismeskis contract. And you can see, while it's $269, that's just the increase for the local. We are using, we anticipate using 200,000 of the transportation revolving account to offset that. Transportation for special education is anticipated to be the same. Field trips district-wide, things would be like, you know, step up day for the middle school students to go up to the high school, something along that line. That's not school specific. Based on trends, the cost for our homeless transportation, Jake felt could be slightly decreased. Then gas repairs for our vehicles increased. Our fuel usage increased by $50,000. And Jake has worked with Carol Collins on the city side to look at that. At this point, the primary driver of this is the fact that our diesel van, minibus, whatever it's categorized as, the diesel one is the size that is required to take the longest trips. So of course, with the cost of diesel, that didn't help, but you know, that is the vehicle needed for the longest trips. Okay, and then, okay, just to explain this.
I do have some questions on transportation.
Sure, go ahead.
If I could, thank. So the what I assume is a grant in 270, and then the other grant in 274, maybe, or 73. Can you tell me which grants those are?
The sped transportation one is coming out of the tuitions that we charge for the students. It's a sped tuition revolving, and the 200,000 is coming out of the transportation revolving account.
Oh, okay. I just want to make a comment on that transportation services bottom line. That 500, I'm sorry, that that increase is still very significant there. I'm concerned about that going forward. It looks like, you know, if you go back a couple of years, we are steadily increasing. So I'm not questioning this budget. It is the budget you're putting in front of us, but I guess at some point I would like us to have a conversation as a committee with you about transportation costs, and if there are other ways for saving. Maybe not. Maybe it's just what transportation costs these days. As you say, it was a significant increase in the fuel of as much as anything.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor. You want to try to finish the pay? Did someone else have a question?
I was just going to say we're pushing $2 million for transportation services. Not there yet, but that was all.
Thank you.
Okay. We're really almost to the end, I promise. Yep. So of note, the sick leave buyback line has a reduction of $1 million. So first, sick leave buyback is a benefit that is included in some of our collective bargaining agreements for people upon retirement. So that needs to be accounted for. However, the $1 million of ESSER funding that I said we were using to offset the cost of salaries, this is where it is. It offsets the bottom line of the budget. At the end, when this budget is in whatever configuration it is at the end, we will move the allocation in this marigold line to sort of be specific to which school it ends up being offsetting. But right now, it's really offsetting the bottom line of salaries. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then, what you're saying is that is actually ESSER funding, that $1 million.
Yes.
That you will maybe use or maybe not have to use. Is that what I'm understanding?
For me, well, yes, I'm anticipating using it, and that's part of what got us down to a 10% increase.
Mhm. Okay.
It depends on what the mayor funds us, Mayor.
Very true, very true.
Andy said it, I didn't.
Yeah, right. Well,
Thanks, Andy.
it's nice to know you have it there.
Yes.
All kidding aside, it's a placeholder for when we revisit how we're going to use it. We'll allocate it accordingly, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then really the last of this is school committee secretary. I already talked about this. We needed to capture both the school secretaries, the school committee secretary's salary or annual rate, as well as the stipends for the school committee as identified in the charter. So the increase is because one of those two was not reflected in prior budgets.
Right.
And then I'm excited. I was going to scroll to the last page because the next page is the last page. It's just that.
There you go.
Not necessarily pretty, but it is the end.
Any questions from the school committee about these final line items that were just reviewed? Okay, so at this point, I would like a motion to accept the superintendent's budget for fiscal year 24 as a school committee budget for fiscal year 24. And obviously, like we do the motion, we have a second, and then we discuss, and then we vote.
So moved.
Second.
So that sounded like Martini and Ekstrom with the second.
True.
And let's move into discussion. You guys can just speak up, or maybe Christine, no, let's keep your share open just in case there are questions that go back
okay.
to that.
Yep.
It just makes it hard for me to see. So please, if the committee does have questions, go ahead and speak up. I have a question while I'm waiting for my colleagues to ask. ESSER 3 expires in September of 24. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so ESSER 2 expires in this calendar year. ESSER 3, which is the last of the grants from the COVID money from the federal government, expires in September of 24, and then it can no longer be used even if you have it, right?
There is a period, a slight period after the date where if you have something encumbered and the bill comes in, you can still pay it, but you can't commit money from it after that date. So if
After
we
that
order
date.
books, for example, and they hadn't quite come in on the FedEx truck yet, we could still pay the bill, but
Right.
we couldn't order new things after the end of the grant period.
Okay.
Can I stick with the ESSER funding question a
ahead.
little bit? I don't look at your funding on ESSER all the time. So can you have a sense now, based on what we're looking at here in front, how much ESSER funding in total you still have left? Are you spending it all? Or, and I guess by that I mean whether it's 2 and 3. And
so let me, I can't look at my document without
you could
getting
get
rid of
back
my
to me
sheet.
on that
So
too, if you
I
want.
definitely will get back to you, but what I will say is between the technology that is still allocated, the security upgrade, which is still, or the project, which is still allocated, all the money for staff, whether it's utilizing some of it to settle any retroactive payments, if there may be any in the contracts, and using the $1 million for this, as well as some, we have $100,000 in the grant to pay for textbooks, things like that. But we do, at this stage, we have it allocated. We have it all allocated.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions and comments from the committee about the budget? Speak now or we're going to vote. I have a question from Susan Farber, please.
Traditionally, this motion would include at the total amount of.
Oh, you are so right. Yes.
And I'm also, because I was busy getting the motion down, I missed who moved it and seconded, please.
The motion was member Martini and the second was member Ekstrom.
Thank you so
And
much.
let me change. So we'll do a friendly amendment, move to accept the superintendent's budget for fiscal year 24 as the school committee budget for fiscal year 24 at a total of,
And I'm gonna ask Andy to read it because
Please.
just better for him.
$23,151,624.
Right there.
And not the 29. It's
No,
the
no,
local appropriation.
correct, a local appropriation, no, correct.
Thanks again.
and our mover and our second, will you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan Farber, for reminding us of that. Further discussion before we vote or questions? All right, it sounds like we are ready to move to a vote on the budget. And we do have to do a roll call. So Secretary Ekstrom, please.
Member Deneve is not present. Myself, I approve. Member Johnson Musad,
Yes.
Vice Chair Martini,
Yes.
Chair Peretti,
Yes.
Mayor Wall.
Mayor Wall. Look at that. Them's fighting words right there.
Vision is good. Member Wall.
Yes.
I suspect she'd hit me harder than anyone else. Mayor Wiedegartner.
I'm accepting it as the superintendent's budget.
Okie dokie, we are united. Jeez, now I can't even talk at all. We all agree and we approve. Good job, superintendent.
Thank
Excellent.
you very much for your time. That was a long, but I appreciate the opportunity to explain all of that.
Excellent. Before we adjourn, Mayor Wiedegartner, I want to quickly put you on the hot seat that's hopefully not too much of a hot seat, but related to the budget. In your budget book, last year, there was some confusion or concern from folks because none of the narrative elements of the school committee budget made it into the book. It was just like the numbers, the itemized stuff. If we could get some assurance that there will be some context, whether it's we put the slides in there or Christine takes her text off of the slides and puts them in something that's a little more manageable for the budget book, I would really appreciate it. I know there were questions last year at Ways and Means and City Council as to why nothing explaining it was actually in there.
My recollection as to the why was that it did not come in time for the budget, but I'd have to double check that. But I've taken a note of it because we are starting on the budget book, and it's Danny who's doing the budget books.
I know where to find her.
You do know where to find her, and so do I.
That would be, I think that would just be helpful for
We
everyone.
could double team her and say, what the hey?
That's right. Awesome.
But
Thank you.
that's my recollection of last year, or it was maybe truncated a little bit because I do believe it was a little behind. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, it's neither here nor there. This is a different year, and thank you for the request.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing anyone jump in, so I would take a motion to adjourn. And again, before you log off, it does have to be a roll call.
So
Did I get a
moved.
motion? So move from.
Sorry, again, if I could, generally what happens is there's a motion to close the budget hearing.
You are so right.
And a second motion to adjourn.
You are
And
so
also,
right.
before everybody leaves after we adjourn, I have a question for the mayor, please.
Okay,
We need a budget
Parliamentarian.
hearing check sheet.
We need a parliamentarian for sure.
Okay.
So the motion would be to close the FY24 budget hearing.
Anyone want to make that motion? I'll make that
So
motion.
moved.
And who wants the second? And the mayor is my second. And we need a roll call on closing the budget hearing, please.
Secretary Ekstrom, yes. Member Johnson Masad,
Yes.
Vice Chair Martini,
Yes.
Chair Proietti,
Yes.
Member Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Weidergartner. We are
Okay.
closed.
And how about a motion to adjourn
Moved.
and a second?
Second.
Okay, that was Martini, and a roll call vote, please.
Secretary Ekstrom, yes. Member Johnson Masad,
Yes.
Vice Chair Martini,
Yes.
Chair Proietti,
Yes.
Member Wall,
Yes.
Mayor Weidergartner.
Yes.
We are adjourned.
Thank you all. 1:42 p.m. I thank you all for your work. Everyone have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
And I'm staying on because Susan wants to ask me a question.